Okay. And I want you guys to know that I expect the concepts of energetic anatomy on the test that you take to be very simple and very broad. I'll get some stuff together, a presentation together for that. I do have a video called Cam by Kim. I'm Kim on YouTube. And if you watch that, it'll take you really in depth. That is a video I would recommend you watch only if you're curious and you have the time. So it will discuss chi or chi, and basically chi is just, you know, the life force that for the MBLEx purposes, that's what it is. It's the life force. And it'll talk about basic terms like yin and yang and meridians. I don't think polarity is discussed in there, but chakras are. But it'll go really in depth with the things like Alexander technique and Feldenkrais. Now, while Alexander and Feldenkrais are not mentioned in concepts of energetic anatomy, and they're also not mentioned in the e-study, I'm talking about the FSMTB e-study guide, right? While they're also not mentioned in the e-study guide and in other modules, I have seen those as practice questions. So I've seen them on sites. I haven't seen them on the FSMTB or on the AMTA. So I'm assuming that Alexander technique and Feldenkrais will not be on the MBLEx, but they sure do appear heavily on the sites other than FSMTB and AMTA. So I think you should know something about those, and it's very quick and very easy to understand. So watch that video if you have time. If not, just wait until next week and I'll have a new thing for you. And I don't plan to cover those in class. I'm just going to give you a presentation and a video for that, and for one or two of the other body systems like the integumentary or lymphatic system, or maybe both if I have the time, and then give those to you to study on your own. Remember, some of these things you're going to have to pursue on your own. I did not have time to fill out, for example, all of the to cover all of the study points for like each section that we study or each body system that we study. So you are going to have to get those together for yourself. So for example, under anatomy and physiology module, when we cover the nervous system, we covered all this stuff. But there were 2 points that we did not cover specifically, and that's the location of the nerve plexuses and the branches within the peripheral nervous system. So where's the plexus located for the cardiac? Where's the cardiac plexus? Is it approximately here? Is it higher? Is it lower? Right? Where would the hepatic plexus be? Would it be around the liver? Would it be down into the lumbar? Would it be higher up in the thoracic? Right? Just knowing where these things are, and then knowing approximately where the nerves originate and where they go to is what they're talking about. And then understanding the reflexes within the body. We haven't discussed all the reflexes. We've only discussed 2 reflexes. We've discussed stretch reflex, and we've discussed an agonist inhibition. So the stretch reflex is antagonist inhibition, and the agonist inhibition is where the agonist is forced to let go in response to excessive load. Antagonist inhibition is detected and initiated by the intrafusal muscle spindle fibers, which detect stretch and the rate of stretch on the muscle. And the agonist inhibition, which forces the agonist muscle to fail or to let go, is detected by the Golgi tendon organ, which detects force on the tendon, force on the muscle. So you know, I have to pick and choose the stuff that we cover. Sometimes it's a matter of time for me, but most often it's a matter of making sure that we cover the stuff that's more difficult rather than the stuff that I think you can look up on your own. All right, so let's have a look at the kinesiology study guide. So if you go to your MBLEx folder and you go down to the FSMTB e-study guide, you find the A&P section, kinesiology section, pathology section. And so far, we've covered components and characteristics of muscles, concepts of muscle contraction, that's sliding filament theory, agonist, antagonist, synergist, and prime mover. We're continuously adding to those particular ones, concentric, eccentric, and isometric. I have a video on all of those: concentric, eccentric, isometric, agonist, antagonist. If you guys want to watch the video, I don't go through all the muscles, but I go through quite a few. I go through like the neck, the shoulder, the back, thorax, abdomen, low back, hip, thigh, knee, hip, thigh, lower leg. Proprioception, which is what we were just talking about the muscle spindle fibers versus the Golgi tendon organs. And today, and we have been covering location, attachment, actions, and fiber directions of muscles. And today we're gonna continue covering those specifically for the abdomen, low back, and for the inner hip. Abdomen, low back, and inner hip. Then we're going to continue next time with joint structure and function. We've discussed a lot about this, but I think you guys need to review, and I don't have an organized slides presentation for this. I just put it on the MBLEx basics. So I do think that you'll benefit from seeing this again, unless you don't want to, in which case you should shoot me a text and say, no, I think I got it for the joints. And if the majority of people say that, then I won't cover it again. Range of motion we have not covered, but we will be covering that next time. Active, passive, and resisted range of motion. So today, in keeping with the study points for locations, attachments, which is origin and insertion, the actions and the fiber directions of the muscles, we're going to look at some of the major muscles of the body. We're going to look at the internal and external obliques and the transverse abdominis and the quadratus lumborum. I think of those four muscles as a set. And then as a different set, we're going to look at, maybe we should back up. So the obliques, the internal external obliques, the transverse abdominis, the rectus abdominis, and the rectus abdominis, and then the quadratus lumborum. Those five muscles are the shallow muscles of either the anterior or the posterior abdominal wall, right? The quadratus lumborum is not actually in the back, it's actually in the farthest, deepest portion of the abdomen. So it goes with the transverse abdominis, the external obliques, and the rectus abdominis muscle. And then, so that's one group, right? That does flexion, extension, side flexion, and rotation of the core of the spine and the rib cage, and it's called the trunk. And then the next group is the group of the medial hip, muscles that act on the medial hip, with the exception of the gemellus and the piriformis muscle, which are actually part of this group, the same group. Those muscles insert on the medial aspect of the femur, and those are the ilium, the psoas. I'm leaving one out from the front. I'll get there later, but the psoas and some of those other muscles are also, like the gemellus, are also considered part of the muscles that act on the hip. They're called the muscles of the inner hip, the muscles of the inner hip, right? So it's not actually medial hip. I misspoke. Muscles of the inner hip. Okay. So we're going to start with these muscles of the abdominal wall. So you have on the front, wrapping around to the side and the back, you have the internal oblique, the external oblique, the transverse abdominis. You also have the rectus abdominis in the front, which just goes superior to inferior. It doesn't wrap around. And then in the back, need a second. Sorry for the interruption. Okay, and then in the back is the quadratus lumborum muscle. So those muscles all together, they make up the muscles of the abdominal wall. and I have some kind of handy stuff that I got together for you. So let's get started. We're gonna do some movement in the latter half of the class, but first we're gonna just talk about these, and then hopefully the kinesthetic part will really help you. So so for the obliques, I like to start actually with the external oblique, because it's the one that's right under the skin. It's the most shallow. It's the most shallow of the obliques, and the internal oblique is under the external oblique. The rectus abdominis is actually over top the internal oblique and under the external oblique. You don't really need to know that. I just want you to know like how they're layered. So the external oblique, I like to think of the external oblique as going down and in. Down and in. And if you look at the fibers of the external oblique, they start at like the fifth rib. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good drawing. At the fifth rib, and they go down to, they say it's like the 12th rib. And so it has all these origins from ribs 5 through 12, right? So it's starting up. So everybody touch your ribs. Like here, it's starting up, and it's going down toward the midline. The midline is also called the linea alba. It's also called the linea alba. And just intuitively, if you think about the muscles going from the ribs down toward the linea alba like this, you could imagine that if you contract unilaterally, it would bring my right rib cage down toward the left hip. So there is some twisting happening. Also, if you contract them on one side without torsion, they contribute to side flexion. And if you contract them on both sides, then they would contribute to the flexion of the trunk. Flexion of the trunk. Right. One thing that I want to say now, and I will be saying over and over again, is that when you think about, okay, so with these muscles, the question is always going to be, does the muscle contract ipsilaterally, or does it contract contralaterally, right? And the way I like to think about what side it contracts to and the action that it produces, what side it contracts and the action that it produces, is by obviously what side is contracting, right? So this is the right side, this is the left side. But it's really easy for me, at least, to get confused thinking about, is this a turn to the right or is this a turn to the left? The answer is it's a turn to the left because the nose or the eyes are going toward the left, right? So I used to think about the shoulder, which way the shoulder would travel to, and then I transposed it at some point, thinking that, okay, since this is the right shoulder that's moving, this is right rotation. It isn't. It's the right shoulder rotating left, but forget about the shoulder. Think about the eyes. So if your trunk is rotating and the eyes are going that way to the left, the right side is contracting and the left side and the eyes are looking to the left. This is left rotation. Likewise, if you're rotating towards the right, the eyes end up to the right. That's right side rotation. So left side rotation, right side rotation. It's all in the eyes. The eyes have it. So as far as contralateral versus ipsilateral goes, we'll get to a handy trick to remember that in a minute when we see the internal obliques. So finishing up with the external obliques, they originate from the ribs. That means that the ribs are the most stable area. Maybe a little counterintuitive for you to think of the ribs because they move when we breathe, they move when we twist, they move when we side flex. Maybe a little counterintuitive for you to think of this as the more stable area, and to think of the linea alba as the more movable area, but that is how they define origin and insertion. So you're going to have to remember they originate on these bones, and the fibers of the external oblique insert along this soft tissue structure, the linea alba. If you look in any anatomy book or website, it'll tell you that the fibers of the external oblique, they run all the way down. If you look at the slides here, they run all the way down to various parts of the iliac crest or the ilium. Remember, the ilium is on top, the ischium is on the bottom. You sit on your ischial tuberosity, the anterior superior iliac spine, posterior superior iliac spine are on the top. Iliac on the top, ilium on the top, ischium on the body. Ilia on the top, ischium on the body. You will see that it attaches to like the anterior superior iliac spine, the anterior inferior iliac spine, and then this structure that we never talk about called I think it's called the pectineal inguinal arch or something like that. That's another aspect of the ilium. Don't worry about any of that. Just remember, is it the front or the back of the ilium? First, is it the ilium or the ischium? And then is it the front or the back of the ilium or the ischium? Like the external obliques attach to the front of the ilium. Quadratus lumborum attaches to the back of the ilium. We'll see that quadratus lumborum in a minute. If you look at the sort of 3D-ish portions, you can see 3D-ish drawings. You can see that with the external obliques, they wrap around all the way to the back. You can see like parts of the internal oblique attaching or peeking out through the ribs in the back. Likewise, for the external obliques, they also wrap around to the back. So if you look at the descriptions of the attachments, it's more than ribs 5 through 12, linea alba, and the anterior ilium. If you look at those, it'll say, like, for example, ribs 5 through 12 and the thoracolumbar aponeurosis in the back, and maybe like, I don't know, part of the posterior ilium or something like that. But I didn't include those because I don't think that they're that relevant for this muscle. So I did trim out the origins and the insertions just to make it easier for you to remember where they originate, insert, where they attach. And the big reason that I did that is just to get rid of so much extraneous information that I think is going to be a little much for you to handle. And I kept the information, kept the attachment sites that for me most clearly define the action of the muscle, how it moves the body. All right, so again, the external oblique goes from the ribs 5 through 12, goes down and in toward the midline to the linea alba. And they do bilaterally, they do trunk flexion, the external obliques. Unilaterally, they do side flexion, ipsilaterally. So right side flexion so the right external oblique does right side flexion. And then for torsion of the trunk or for rotation of the trunk, it's contralateral. So the right external oblique does left facing trunk rotation. So how are you going to remember like whether the rotation is contralateral or ipsilateral? Because for all of these three muscles, the internal and external obliques and for both of these internal and external obliques, they all do when they contract bilaterally, they all do flexion of the trunk. They all do flexion of the trunk. Bilateral contraction of the internal oblique does trunk flexion. Bilateral contraction of the external oblique does trunk flexion. So for those two, how are you going to remember the difference between rotation? So the way that I remember rotation is that the internal oblique starts with letter I, that's ipsilateral. So internal oblique does ipsilateral rotation. So if I'm contracting my right internal oblique, it does ipsilateral rotation. So my eyes would end up facing the right. So the right internal oblique turns me toward the right. The left internal oblique would rotate me toward the left. So I, internal, letter I, ipsilateral. And then if I, internal, ipsilateral, then external is contralateral by default. So internal is ipsilateral, and then external is just by default contralateral. I hope that's helpful. So if my right side external oblique, if I'm using my right side external oblique, it's going to rotate me toward the left. If I'm using my left side external oblique, it's going to rotate me toward the right. And in a minute, we'll look at a drawing and a video that hopefully will make that a little clearer for you. Both of them, they do lateral flexion on the same side. So that's ipsilateral, lateral rotation, or lateral rotation ipsilaterally. Okay, let's look at this combination of the muscles. Oh wait, we got to do the origin and insertion of the internal oblique. Then we'll look at the combination of the muscles. Then I'll test you guys a little bit. All right. So now the internal oblique. So if you look at the internal oblique, its fiber direction, I think of it as going up and toward the midline, up and toward the midline. So the external oblique goes down and in toward the midline, down and in toward the midline. And if we're looking at the external oblique, if you're starting at the outside and going toward the inside, then for the internal oblique, also start on the outside and go toward the inside. But the fiber direction changes. Instead of going down, it goes up. So the internal oblique goes up and in toward the midline. And its origin is more clearly this time in the back, the thoracolumbar area, right? And also the anterior ilium. So it has attachments that originate in the back, which make it very stable back there. That's the origin, right? And some of those, they go, what are the fiber directions back there? The fiber directions on the front, they are actually from outside to inside. They're traveling superiorly, but with the internal oblique in the back, let me just see if I can find the internal oblique posterior view. Thoracolumbar fascia. Dorsi. Yeah, anatomists don't even like to draw it that much. Okay, so here's like a tiny bit of the internal oblique. It's going upward. You can just see these tiny little fibers right here going from yeah, here's the internal oblique too. See, it's going this way. It's going upward, upward toward the midline. So the fibers are continuous. They go upward toward the midline, so up and in for the internal oblique, upward and inward toward the midline. Starting in the back, they also go upward and inward toward the midline. And the place where they insert, so what they're going to move is the ribs and the linea alba, and they insert at the lower ribs 10 through 12, and at the linea alba. So they come up like this, and they insert at these lower ribs. Here's 12, 11, 10. So they insert on these ribs right here. So my 10th rib follows up here, and I can feel it joins with my 9th rib right there. Yeah. So it attaches along here, going this way, and continues past the 10th rib up to the linea alba, up to about the xiphoid process. So the fibers are going like this. I hope you all are going like this right now. Kind of hard to make this motion. Try it, you'll see it's hard. Right, they go in and upward. So you can see these fibers, if you contract them, you can imagine if you contract them bilaterally, they would do trunk flexion. Right? And if you contract one side, they would do lateral flexion. Same side, ipsilateral, lateral flexion, and then they do rotation. Rotation is the letter mnemonic. So internal, letter I, ipsilateral. So they would rotate. So my face is turning toward the right. Right side, internal oblique, rotates the eyes to the right. Like this, internal oblique. External oblique goes this way. So the right side external oblique would contract this way, rotating me that way, rotating me to the left. External oblique contracts the ribs downward, rotating me to the left. Internal oblique contracts, pulling the ribs in the linea alba downward this way, pulling me toward, rotating me toward the right. I hope that's helpful. Internal, letter I, ipsilateral rotation. External, no letter, contralateral rotation. So now let's look at a combination of those fibers. So what I did here was I just took the external oblique, which goes in and down from the ribs in and down to the linea alba, and then and then the internal oblique from the ilium, the thoracolumbar, and the ilium in and up. So external obliques in and down, external obliques in and up, or down and in, up and in, down and in, up and in, I guess I should say. So what I did here is I just took the internal oblique and I just cut it and put it right next to the external oblique. Because what I want you to see is if we're rotating the trunk, this would be rotating to the left. Okay, so the eyes are here and we're going to rotate this way. So this shoulder here, this is the right shoulder, the client's right shoulder. Shoulder is going to come this way. The eyes are going to come this way. That's looking towards the left. This is left. This is right. I wanted you to see that the right side external oblique would pull the ribs down and rotate toward the midline. So the head would end up looking toward the left. Right side external obliques rotate toward the left. Likewise, left side internal obliques would pull the midline and the ribs down this way toward the left. So the eyes end up turning to the left. And then vice versa. Left side external obliques turn the body toward the right. So the eyes are looking toward the right. Right side internal obliques turn the body toward the same side, ipsilateral. Left side external obliques rotate the torso contralateral toward the right. Right side internal obliques rotate the torso ipsilateral toward the right. And let's look at this video. Move this because I think it would actually, well, you know what, it's fine where it is. Okay, let's look at this video by the biochemist. Sound on this is not too good, but you'll get the point.
Hello students, we're going to discuss internal and external abdominal oblique and how they contribute to rotation of the spine.
Okay, when he says rotation of the spine, he's not talking about rotation of the torso. He's separating rotation of the spine and rotation of the torso, but in a minute he switches and talks about the rotation of the torso.
Now the more posterior fibers are fairly vertical. They can contribute to lateral flexion and some extension, but probably not much rotation, certainly not from neutral. And some of the more inferior fibers are also not great at rotation.
So you should just disregard that because the MBLEx is not going to ask you about like how vertical the fibers are in the back compared to the front. They're not going to ask you that. And they're not going to ask you like, are they efficient or not efficient at contributing to rotation of the spine? So just disregard the first 26 seconds of the video, but he continues to talk about the movement of the rib cage. Rib cage is kind of synonymous with trunk, synonymous with the eyes turning.
But the more superior anterior fibers of both internal and external obliques are efficient at rotation. So I've represented some of the sections here.
The more superior and anterior fibers compared to the more inferior and posterior fibers, inferior, posterior, superior, anterior. The more superior anterior fibers of the internal and external obliques are more efficient at trunk rotation, not spine rotation, trunk rotation. See how difficult it is, like cover everything? Trunk rotation. And one thing that he does that's really smart is he creates these red and yellow color bands. So the red ones are the external obliques. This is the right side, this is the left side. The red ones are the external obliques, and the external obliques go from the rib cage, ribs 5 through 12. They go down and into the midline. Here's the midline. You can kind of make it out. Here's the midline. So they go down and in and attach to the midline. Then the internal obliques, they go up and in. So the yellow ones are the internal obliques. And this is the reason I chose this video to show to you, is because this is the first time I saw someone connecting the two muscles as a continuous, as like a continuous group, two parts of the same group. Sort of like the psoas and the iliacus come together to be, to create a common tendon called the iliacus muscle, or the iliacus tendon. He's saying that the external obliques on the left and the internal obliques on the right meet at the linea alba in order to create a continuous group, and they both move the torso in the same direction. They both rotate the torso toward the right. In this case, the left external obliques rotate the torso to the right internal obliques rotate the torso to the left. Can you guys see clearly now how those fibers, the external and the internal obliques, work together? One rotating contralaterally and the other rotating ipsilaterally. Can I hear some yeses or some no's? Actually, you don't have to say yes if you understand, but is anybody unclear on that? You don't see it?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not understanding
Sure.
like
Sure.
the ipsilateral and the like
Okay.
contralateral.
We will get a little bit more into it then. Okay, so let's finish with
External
this.
oblique is a contralateral rotator. So for this example, the right side muscle is external oblique. It would rotate to the left.
So the external oblique is a contralateral rotator. So repeat after me. The external oblique is a contralateral rotator.
The external oblique is
a contralateral rotator.
External oblique is a contralateral rotator.
Right. Correct. So the right external oblique, say the right external oblique.
The right external oblique
The right
rotates
external oblique
rotates the eyes to the left.
rotates the eye
the
to the
eyes
left.
to the left.
This guy's standing on the left of the skeleton. You don't have to say that.
Okay.
The internal oblique is an ipsilateral rotator. The internal oblique
is
The
an
internal
ipsilateral.
ipsilateral.
Ipsilateral rotator. So the right internal oblique
The right internal
The right
oblique
internal oblique
Right internal oblique.
is
rotates the eyes to the right.
ipsilateral.
rotates the eyes to the right.
The right external oblique rotates the eyes to the right.
The right external.
Right
No.
external.
No, I'm
Can
sorry.
you repeat that? Sorry.
Yes, because I said external when I meant to say internal. The right internal oblique
Okay.
The
rotates the
right
eyes to the right.
The right internal
to the-
oblique rotates the eyes to the right.
Correct. The left external oblique rotates the eyes to the right.
The left external
Left
oblique
external
rotates
oblique.
the eyes to the right.
Yeah. Rotation to the right. Let me start over. Rotating the eyes to the right is accomplished by the left external oblique. Rotating the eyes to the right is accomplished by the left external oblique.
Rotating the right.
The eyes
Rotating the
rotating
eyes
your
to the right
right.
is accomplished by the left
By the
external.
left external.
It's accomplished by the left external.
Rotating the eyes to the right is accomplished by the right internal. Rotating the eyes to the right
Rotating the eyes to the right
Rotating the eyes to the right
is accomplished by the right internal.
is accomplished by the right internal.
is accomplished by the right internal
And the left external.
And the left external.
and the left external.
Yes, correct. Right internal, left external rotates to the right. Right
Right
internal,
internal to
left
Right.
external
left external
rotates to the right.
rotates to the right.
Very good. Left internal, right external rotates to the left. Left
Right
internal,
internal,
left internal,
left internal,
right external
right external
rotates to the left.
rotates to the left.
Yes. Now let's do some movement with it. Okay. So you just find your rib cage, and then you find your ilium. So my ilium is down here, right? The ilium is shaped like this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the rib cage is shaped like that. See?
Mm-hmm.
So now you're oriented, and the linea alba is in the front. So now let's first do the external obliques. So the external obliques go down and in. So they start at the rib cage and they go down and in toward the linea alba and toward the ischium, the ilium, right? So they go like that. So now take your rib cage on the right. This is your rib cage on the right hand on the right rib cage pointed toward the midline, pointed toward the linea alba. Does everyone have that hand placement?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so now bring your right rib cage toward your midline like this. Right, so you're bringing your right rib cage and you're twisting it and slightly going down a little bit. And from the side, it looks like this. Is anyone confused? Does everyone have that movement clearly? Speak up. Is anyone
I
confused?
kind of, but we have the internal oblique in both sides, right and left, right?
Yeah, but I'm splitting them up. So we're only doing one. We're only doing the external oblique right now.
That's fine.
Okay? And then we're going to do the internal oblique in a moment. Right. All right. So you have the external oblique going from the ribs going down and into the linea alba. So that creates a motion. Watch my shoulder and watch this hip. That creates a motion this way, right? With the fibers. Everybody do that. That's like when you lay down on your back and you're doing bicycles. Right? That's the external oblique. In this case, the right one, and it's rotating towards left. Does everyone feel that clearly? Does anyone not feel it? Okay, so let's switch to the left external oblique. So the left external oblique, now put your left hand on your left rib cage and point your fingers down and in toward your linea alba. If you kept going, it would go all the way down to your ilium, right? So the fibers are going this way, right? And it's going to bring your rib cage down towards your hip. So it's going to bring this rib cage or shoulder down toward the opposite hip. So the action is like this. Right? So my left external oblique is rotating me toward the right. My eyes are facing toward the right. Now switch your hands. Put your right hand on your ribs, fingers facing in and down toward the linea alba. And now my right external oblique is going to rotate me toward the left. My eyes are facing toward the left. See? Is anybody still confused about the rotation of the external oblique? Awesome. So we're rotating to the left, correct? The right external oblique is doing this left rotation. My eyes are facing that way. It's the right side external oblique that's contracting to rotating to the left. And then take your fingers where the external oblique meets the linea alba. Take your fingers from the linea alba and draw the internal oblique from the linea alba down to the ilium. From the internal oblique goes from the linea alba, the midline, down to the ilium. And continue the contraction where the linea alba, the midline, is turning this way. Right. So now, can you see how both of those are working together? The external oblique is bringing the rib cage towards the linea alba. The internal oblique is bringing the linea alba toward the ilium. You guys see that? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Awesome. So
Yes.
we're turning. Nice. So we're rotating to the left. My eyes are going to the left. My right external oblique is bringing the rib cage towards the midline. The left internal oblique is bringing the midline toward the hip. And now switch your hands. So left side on your rib cage, right side on your hip and linea alba. So now the left side, left external oblique is rotating my torso to the right. My eyes are facing right. And the right side internal oblique is pulling, continuing that movement, pulling the linea alba toward the hip, continuing the rotation of the right. Does everyone see that movement clearly? Those two muscles are working together.
Yes.
Great. Okay, now it's quiz time. Quiz time, quiz time. Wow. That's a Tronata. K-Tronata. I'm just like showing how unhip I am. Okay, so let's check out the movement of the skeleton here because he does the movement. So now he's gonna grab this this right rib cage, and he's gonna pull the right rib cage down toward the left hip. So he's gonna rotate the skeleton left. The eyes are gonna point left. And notice that the external obliques are gonna slacken. They're pulling the they're gonna shorten rather. They're pulling the left rib cage to the midline. So let's see that.
Perform the action, we should see the muscles.
Left rib cage toward the midline. And then the internal oblique on the right is going to continue to pull the linea alba or the midline toward the hip. So I would say from to about there would be the external oblique. I'm just imagining this so I can remember it, right? And the rest of the movement is the internal oblique on the other side. I think he does it one more time. Oh, he's just showing that that both sides bilateral contraction will do flexion of the trunk. Okay, so time to quiz now. All right, so how should we do this? Okay, so you guys look at and move with me first. All right, so place your left hand on your left rib cage. Left hand on your left rib cage. Please point your fingers down from the rib cage to the linea alba. Now, before you name the muscle, tell me, which direction would the contraction of this muscle turn my head? Would it turn my eyes to the right, or would it turn my eyes to the left?
Right.
The right. Does everybody agree? Does anybody disagree? Great. Okay, and then place your right hand below your left hand on the linea alba. Right hand on the linea alba, and the fingers of the left hand best as you can going down toward your ilium. And see these fibers contracting. Would that turn my head toward the right, or would it turn it toward the left?
Left.
Okay, the fibers are going this way from the linea alba diagonally down to the hip. So if you're going to pull the linea, say again, you what?
It would go to the left, wouldn't it?
It would turn my eyes to the right. The right. This is the right, this is the left.
Oh, sorry.
So it would pull the linea alba down and toward the right. Down and toward the right, toward the ilium. All right, let's do that again. Let's do that again. Let's go to the other side. Right hand on your ribs, down and in toward the linea alba. Now, if I contract these fibers this way, which way am I turning? To the left or to the right?
Left.
To the left, that's correct, eyes left. Now continue the fibers with the internal, switch the muscle, internal oblique. Go from the linea alba down to the ilium, down to the ilium. Look at the direction my hand is moving. Draw it on yourself. Draw it on yourself. From the linea alba down to the ilium. Which way is it going to turn me? Toward the left or toward the right?
Left.
Does everyone agree with turning toward the left? Awesome. Okay, now didactic. A baseball player is right-handed, swings the bat. Which way does he or she turn? A right-handed baseball player swinging the bat. Which way? To the left. Which oblique, internal or external, is right or left, is rotating toward the left? Oh, sorry, let me rephrase. The external oblique, is it the right or the left that's rotating towards the left?
The right.
Right.
Very good, very good. And is it the right or left internal oblique that's rotating to the left? Is it the right or left?
Left.
Or left. Very good. Very good. Okay. A golfer is shit. I hate golf. A dragon boat person is rowing this way, right-handed, and they're twisting towards left. Okay, or whatever. So the eyes are not twisting to the left, twisting to the right. The eyes are facing the right. This is the right over here. That's the right, twisting to the right. So the external obliques, are they the left side or the right side? They're turning the person to the right. The left side or the right, turning to the right. External oblique.
The left.
Left.
The left side, very good. And the internal obliques, is it the right side or the left side that's turning to the right?
The right.
Left.
Ooh. Internal oblique goes from
Right.
the linea alba down to the ischium. So that would be the right ilium, the right internal oblique twisting to the right. Very good. Okay. So, and now purely didactic, like purely words. But let's put the heat on you a little bit, because this is the way a good way to learn. One of the most successful ways to remember things is to be forced to phrase them in your own phrasing, to put them into your own words 3 times, 3 different phrasing. I tried to do that just now. If you watch the tape amidst all the phrasing, you'll notice if you count, I phrase it 3 different ways at least. So can I have a volunteer?
Sure.
Jennifer. Okay. So Jennifer, tell me about the external oblique and then the internal oblique. I want to know which direction, using the words ipsilateral and contralateral, which direction rotation is done by which muscle on which side of the body.
Ooh. Okay, right?
So tell me about the internal and the external oblique.
Internal and external obliques. So
Yeah, I want to know which side, left versus right, does right rotation and which side does left rotation. But I want you to use the words ipsilateral and contralateral.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay, you could start the sentence one of 3 ways. You could start it ipsilateral rotation is accomplished by, and then name the muscle. Okay. You could say right side rotation is accomplished by the name of the muscle ipsilaterally, or the name of the muscle contralaterally. Or you could say the name of the muscle rotates contralaterally. The name of the muscle, external oblique on the left, does, contralateral rotation to the right, or the internal oblique on the right does ipsilateral rotation on the right, however you want to say it. So you could start with the contralateral or ipsilateral. You could start with the direction to the right or the left is accomplished by which muscle, or you could start with the muscle doing contralateral or ipsilateral rotation to which direction. It's complicated before it's not complicated.
No, now I'm forgetting what
Yes.
the ipsilateral and the
Good.
contralateral is.
Good. Now you're confused. This is a great starting point. Okay, so you got to find your way out of this. So if you're talking about the obliques and you're trying to define rotation, what's the first thing that you want to clarify for yourself? Like, what's the discerning characteristic or the discerning thing?
If it's external or internal?
That is for each muscle, right? But for each muscle, regarding the rotation, the action of rotation, what's the characteristic or the aspect of rotation that you want to define first? How are you going to differentiate internal and external oblique in regards to rotation? With most muscles, there's some kind of pneumatic, that is that goes with the first letter of the word or how the word sounds or something like that?
Oh yeah, the ipsilateral is internal.
Yes.
And
And
the contralateral is external.
very good. Okay, now you said ipsilateral is internal, contralateral is external. Can you reverse the words now? So internal,
Internal.
yes, does which one?
Internal does ipsilateral
Very good. And how do you know that?
because it both starts with the I.
Because they both start with the I. Awesome. Nice. Not a bad place to start, right?
Uh-huh.
And then continue with external.
And then external is
By default.
by default contralateral.
By default contralateral. Very good. Okay, now give me a sentence. Did you just groan? There's no groaning in anatomy.
Okay, a sentence. Okay. Okay, hold on. All right, so
So start with the same mnemonic you started with, right?
okay, was it
Good.
internal?
Yes.
Internal.
Fine place to start. Yes.
Okay, so internal is ipsilateral, and that, hold on. Yeah,
Internal is ipsilateral what? Rotation, side flexion, flexion, extension.
Internal is ipsilateral flexion.
Rotation.
Rotation.
Rotation. Yes.
Oh, that is rotation.
Yes. There is an aspect of flexion for sure, because if you look at me, when you rotate, when you rotate,
You're shortening.
you're actually going to shorten and that causes some degree of flexion.
Mm-hmm.
The most flexion will happen if you contract the internal obliques bilaterally, but even contracting them on one side will also flex the trunk in addition to rotating them. So internal obliques cause ipsilateral rotation.
Wait, say that again.
No, you say it again.
Oh, internal obliques cause ipsilateral rotation.
Very good. And now external obliques.
And external obliques cause contralateral rotation.
Very good. Okay, now give me left and right. Differentiate left and right.
You mean?
Touch your torso. Touch your external oblique. Touch your internal oblique. Pick a side.
Let's see. My right. What is it? My right. Right internal or right?
Where's your hand? Is it on your rib cage pointing down and in, or is it on your linea alba pointing in and up?
Oh.
Is your hand going like this from the rib cage to the linea alba down and in, or is it going like this from the ischium in and up toward the linea alba?
Down and in.
Down and in. So is that the external or the internal?
That is the external.
Great. Awesome. So you're which side external oblique, left or right?
This is the left.
Yes. And you know that because it's your left hand on that. And the left side of your body. So the left external oblique causes
goes down and in.
Yes, goes down and in toward the linea alba, and that initiates rotation. Which direction? Ipsilateral or contralateral?
Ips. X.
Letter E.
Mm. Mm.
Internal letter I, ipsilateral. External by default.
Oh, contralateral.
Ah, perfecto. Left external oblique does which rotation?
Left external, hold on. Left external oblique does rotation to the right.
Yes. And is that contra or ipsa?
Mm, that is,
External letter E. I believe you said contra.
yeah.
Very good, very good. Okay, now pick an ipsilateral. She's really taking one for the team, is she not, class? I hope you appreciate her because one of you is going to be next. One of you is going to be next.
Okay, hold on. All right, so for ipsilateral, we're gonna look
For
at
internal.
Oh,
You just
for
did
internal.
external, right? So let's think about it as internal.
Also, internal is up and down. Wait, up and in.
Yes, up and in from the ilium to the linea alba.
Yeah.
Up and in. Start from the outside of the body, go to the midline.
Yes, and that's on the right hand side.
Okay, you're on the right. Good.
So that is making me turn to the left.
Oh, internal
Is it?
letter I, ipsa. Internal letter I, ipsa. What is that?
It'd be, what was the name of that? Ipsilateral.
Internal letter I, ipsilateral.
Ipsilateral rotation.
Ipsilateral rotation. So would that be the right side internal oblique rotating you to the right, or right side oblique rotating you to the left?
Right side oblique turning me to the left.
Right side internal letter I, ipsilateral oblique.
Okay,
Would
right side
rotate you internal, would rotate you ipsilaterally to the right.
Mhm.
To the right. Internal. Yes. Look. Here's the linea alba. Wait, let me fix my shirt. Okay, here's the linea alba. Right here. Here's the ischium. Here's the rib cage. Ischium, ilium, rib cage, linea alba. Right. The internal obliques go from the ilium. If we go from the ilium up to the linea alba. From the ilium
to the
linea alba. In and up. The external obliques go in
But
and down.
But isn't it from the right?
So if they are on the right side, going from the ilium to the linea alba, when they contract, they would go this way. They would shorten this way. So they bring the linea alba toward the right. They bring the eyes to the right. Bring the linea alba toward the ilium. So eyes to the right. Okay, let's try somebody else. Hazel.
Yeah.
Hazel, let's pick up where Jennifer left off. Okay, so place your right hand on your right internal oblique. Right. So the heel of your hand should be down on the ilium, and the fingers should be pointed up. This movement of radial deviation is kind of difficult, but they should be pointed up toward the linea alba. And then with your other hand, just draw the linea alba so that you can see your midline. When the internal oblique contracts, which way is the midline going to go? Is it going to go toward the right ilium, or is it going to go the other way toward the left ilium?
Toward to the ilium.
Toward the ilium, yeah. Toward the ilium on the right, or toward the ilium on the left?
I'm trying to copy you like this way. So
Yeah.
if you're going, which way it's going to the right? Or,
That's okay. That's all right. I believe you said if the right I believe you said it's going toward the right ilium. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
The lineal alba is going to the, sorry,
That's okay.
right.
That is correct. That is correct. That is a result of the internal oblique, which is letter I, which is ipsilateral. Ipsilateral means same side.
The lateral rotation.
Very good. Ipsilateral rotation for the internal oblique. If we're talking about the right internal oblique, it turns the body, turns the torso, turns the eyes to the right.
Yes.
Now place your left hand on the external oblique. Keep your right hand on the internal oblique. Place your left hand on the external oblique. Point your fingers towards the linea alba so your fingers are meeting.
Yes.
Now tell me which external oblique rotates the eyes to the right, rotates the torso to the right. Is it the left external oblique or the right?
The right.
Okay, look at it again. Look at it again, right? The hand is on the left rib cage, pointed toward the linea alba, pointed toward the midline. That's your external oblique on the left. Now contract the left external oblique, bringing the rib cage toward the midline. Which way are your eyes turning? They're turning toward the right or the left?
The left. Going to the left.
I don't want to be in, your camera is off. I don't want to be invasive. Would you be comfortable turning your camera on so that I can see you turning?
I'm trying to do it at the
Okay.
side.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So on your so it looks like you have your is that your left side that you're facing toward the camera?
Because I'm looking for the small. Hang on. Where is my camera? Can't see it myself.
So Hazel, is that your right hand that you have up?
Hang on. Hang on.
Okay, I'll wait.
I didn't see myself.
Oh, you can't see yourself. Okay, that's all right. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
Do at the camera. So this is my right here.
That's your right. Okay, with the bracelets and the other one's left. Okay, great. So you're like this. Okay, so can you take your left hand and place it on your ribs?
Yes, here.
Like that, right? And point your fingers toward the midline. Toward the midline, right? Yeah, toward the midline, right? And I want you to concentrate on feeling those fibers contract. So concentrate on bringing your left rib cage down toward your midline. So your movement's going to like that. Exactly. Yeah. So if you continue that movement and you keep your head neutral, right? Not looking over your shoulder, but if you keep your head neutral, it follows. It goes this way. Which way does your head end up going? Which way do your eyes turn? Right or left?
Left.
No, ma'am.
It's my left to the right.
They turn to the right. Oh, so happy now. Okay, awesome. So if your left rib cage is coming down toward
To the right.
That's correct. Great, good. Okay. All right, guys. I feel like
Oh.
and
Sorry.
the last one. No, it's no problem. I have kids and dogs too. All right. So we just finished this way. Okay. Left rib cage coming down toward the midline. That's the external oblique. Okay. And now put your right hand on the midline with the palm of your hand pointing down toward your ischium. This is the internal oblique, right internal oblique, left external oblique. All right. Now continue the rotation. Pull the linea alba toward the right hip like this. So your internal oblique, your right internal oblique is contracting. Can you feel how that turns your eyes toward the right?
To the left.
The left external oblique turns the eyes to the right. The right internal oblique continues to turn the eyes to the right. So your head spins. Yeah, if you were to let your head keep going, yeah, it would turn over to your right like that.
Okay.
Left external oblique and right internal oblique, Hazel. Left external oblique, right internal oblique, right side turning. You feel it?
So you want me to do a left To the right, right. Right.
Left external to the right.
Now to the right, okay,
Left external to the right. Right internal to the right.
right internal to the right internal.
Yes.
internal.
Yes. Okay, Hazel, you're not off the hook yet. Switch them, okay? So take your hands and go like this. So now your right hand is on your right ribs pointed toward your midline. Your left fingers are on the midline and your left hand is pointed toward the ilium. So they're going like this, okay? So you have the right external oblique, left internal oblique, right external, left internal. Now rotate your torso and eyes to the left. Left.
This is my right. I
Yeah.
confused.
Go to the left. So you're going to go the other way. You're going to end up facing the iPad.
Okay.
Other way, Hazel. Yeah, other way. Not that way. This way.
Wait.
Like that. Like that. Yes.
Right to the left.
Correct.
All right.
To the left.
Right to the left in here. Left,
Right
to the
external.
left. Right external to the left internal. Am I right?
Very good. Very good. Right external to the left internal. That works too. Right internal to the left internal. Yes. That is correct. Remember, internal, ipsilateral, letter I. The word ipsa, I-P-S-E, lateral, ipsilateral means same side. So left internal rotates to the left.
Left internal.
Left internal, internal ipsa, letter I, internal letter I, ipsa, rotates to the left. Meanwhile, the right external by default rotates contralateral. Internal letter I, ipsa. External by default, contra. How you doing, Hazel? Are you
So
still?
no, because I'm trying to write it down so I will not feel confused. So left internal to the right external. Am I right? Then right,
I would say left internal to the right. No, not left internal to the right external. No, right external to the left internal.
left external to the right internal.
Correct.
To the right. I just need to write it down so I don't confuse. Okay.
Yeah, that's all right. Go ahead. And then right external to the left internal, left external to the right internal.
Right external to the left internal.
Correct.
To the left internal.
And then left external to the right internal.
Yeah, so that's the one I have. Left external to the right internal. Then
Yes.
right internal.
Right external.
External to the left internal.
Internal. That's correct. And now look at the look at the presentation. Okay. So we just drew using our hands. We drew right external to the left internal. Right external to the left internal. And likewise, I'm a little disoriented now. Left external to the right internal. Left external to the right internal. And what I want you to remember is, see, that's your unique way of explaining it, external to internal, and that works fine. And you should phrase it for yourself because that's how you remember. That's how you learn. But another way of doing it is to remember internal. Internal begins with letter I. Letter I stands for ipsilateral. So internal I ipsilateral means right side internal rotates right. Right side internal rotates same side, ipsilateral. Whereas for external, there is no letter correspondence. Internal I corresponds to ipsilateral. external letter E doesn't correspond. So so it defaults to contralateral. Internal, same side, external, contralateral. Internal, ipsilateral, external, contralateral. Can I hear you say that a couple times, Hazel?
I get that. Internal is ipsilateral and external is a contralateral.
Yeah, and if you sat down at the MBLEx and you wrote on your scratch paper, when this question comes up, if you just write down internal ipsilateral, external contralateral, or if you write down you write down external to internal, right external rotating to the left internal. If you just write two or three of those down, you'll be able to look at it and extrapolate which side it rotates to which side. Guys, we're spending a lot of time on this. I am happy we're spending a lot of time on this. I don't thank you, Hazel. Thank you for taking one for the team. I do not know how in depth they're going to ask you about this, but if they ask you, you can see how. I mean, it's easy to miss. It's easy to miss. So hopefully it's the amount of time we spend is in proportion to the amount of questions they're going to ask you about it. Hopefully they ask you like 2-3 questions about it. All right, so now we're going to move on. All right, so we did the internal and the external obliques. And now we're going to move on to the transverse abdominis. So the transverse abdominis, we'll do this one and then the QLs and then we'll move on. All right, so the transverse abdominis, it doesn't do flexion, extension. It does some rotation, but it doesn't do flexion or extension. Instead, what it does is it compresses. So if you look at the fibers, they go from the linea alba and they go transverse, like horizontal. Remember, transverse and horizontal, those are the same, right? So they're going like this. They're going like this, and they're wrapping all the way around to the back, right? So they are like a girdle. The transverse abdominis is like a girdle. It wraps, and something that wraps like that, it cinches. It doesn't flex. It doesn't extend. It cinches. So transverse abdominis is this kind of unique muscle that flattens the belly, and also flattens or braces the spine. So both these muscles are going like this. You know, it compresses the abdomen and braces the spine. You can find it most easily. They're not going to test your pulse. You can find it most easily by sticking your thumbs into the fleshy part to your side, and then going, ha, or laughing like this. And you should feel the muscle pushing your thumbs out. Right? That's your transverse abdominis. Goes all the way from the front, all the way to the back. It attaches to or originates from ribs 7 through 12. So 7 down to 12, 7 down to 12. And then also to the thoracolumbar area. And then it inserts to the linea alba around the front. Compresses the abdomen. Compresses front to back. Ha! Or ha. Compresses the abdomen. It also does rotation, ipsilateral rotation. So if I turn to the left, it's my left transverse abdominis contracting. If I turn eyes to the right, it's the right transverse abdominis contracting. Ipsilateral. Almost everything is ipsilateral. Only the external oblique is contralateral. The rectus abdominis is the simplest. It's longitudinal or goes up, down, superior, inferior, or longitudinal. it originates down at the bottom at the pubic symphysis, down at the inferior aspect, not the bottom, the inferior aspect of the ilium or the iliac. So the pubic symphysis, pubic crest. Let me just change that. Ilium. Pubic symphysis. And it inserts at the xiphoid process, which is that triangle shaped extension of the sternum. And and ribs 5 through 7. This is, I didn't take this out. Costal cartilage is ribs 5 through 7. You don't need that. Ribs 5 through 7. It's in the front. You're not going to be thinking that it's going this way. That's the external oblique. That's the external oblique. It goes this way. This way. To ribs 5 through 7 and the xiphoid process down to the ilium, specifically the area called the ischial tuberosity. Specifically called the area called the pubic symphysis. Damn, I guess I need a break. Okay, and it does trunk flexion, abdominal trunk flexion, right? Because that's the way that the fibers go. Superior, inferior, or up, down, trunk flexion. When contracted bilaterally, when contracted ipsilaterally, it does lateral flexion. Lateral flexion, right? And then last but not least, the quadratus lumborum. This is the last one, and then we'll take a break. These fibers also go up, down. They go slightly also lateral, slightly lateral. So these fibers are starting at the 12th rib. They're starting at the 12th thoracic vertebra, the first lumbar, second, third, fourth, fifth lumbar vertebra, and they are extending down, and they have to go a little bit laterally to attach to the iliac crest in the back, the posterior aspect of the iliac crest, posterior ilium. And these, again, they are behind the psoas. They're at the very back of the abdominal cavity. They're in front of the spinal erector, SEG, IlioPsoas, ILS muscles. In front of the ILS, SEGs, in back of the psoas muscle. They insert on the rib and vertebrae L1 through L4. I thought it was L5. Okay, that's kind of unique. I can guarantee they're not going to ask you to differentiate what's the lowest lumbar vertebrae the QL inserts at. They're not going to ask you that. If they do, they are not high quality people. So from the 12th rib down to about L4, just remember like the low back, the thoracolumbar area, that'll be fine, down to the posterior iliac crest. So if origin is at the posterior iliac crest, this is the more stable. And the 12th rib, T12 through L4, those are the ones that are going to move the most. So this one does side bending and it does some extension as well. So bilaterally, when breathing in, it fixes the 12th rib. So the 12th rib doesn't move. 12th rib would be very stable. It would not move. Here's my thumb on the 12th rib during exhalation. And you should see my back extend like this. See that? Now, that's fixing the 12th rib, making sure the 12th rib doesn't move. But if you do lateral flexion of the trunk, it's the iliac part, that is fixed. So this part, these fibers will not move the iliac, the ilium. They will move the rib, the 12th rib, and the lumbar spine. So you just have to remember lateral flexion, ipsilateral, right? We're not talking about the external obliques. It's not complicated. It's the same side, lateral flexion, and it does some extension. Okay. And then we're going to move on after this to the muscles of the inner hip. Let's take a break. I really dragged you guys through it. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Hazel, for hanging in there. Everybody, please unmute and give your classmates a round of applause for your effort.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank
Good
you
job.
very much. Thank you, guys. Very good work. Continue to practice every day. After 3 days, it'll be so much easier. Okay, let's take a break. It's 7:27. Come back at 7:37. Come back at 7:37 Eastern Time. See you in a minute. Come back at 7:37 Eastern Time. And I got to share my screen. I'm going to say that whole thing over again. All right, welcome back, everybody. So let's get organized. The muscles that we just looked at are called the muscles of the abdominal wall. You have the internal oblique, the external oblique, and then the transverse abdominis, right? Internal oblique, external oblique, transverse abdominis. Then you have the rectus abdominis, and you have the quadratus lumborum, those 5 muscles. Also inside the abdomen, but deeper, are the psoas and the iliacus muscle, but those are part of a different group. Those are called the muscles of the inner hip. The muscles of the inner hip, they include, as I mentioned, the psoas and the iliacus, psoas major, psoas minor. They also include the obturator externus and internus, superior gemellus, inferior gemellus, piriformis, and the quadratus femoris. These last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 muscles, those are highlighted. Those are highlighted in yellow because they're also called the muscles of external rotation, or the external rotators. So the inner hip muscles include the iliacus, the psoas, and they include all the external rotators. And the external rotators themselves are these 6 muscles: 2 obturators, 2 gemellus muscles, the piriformis and the quadratus femoris. Out of all these muscles, you really are only going to need to know the piriformis. I really doubt they're going to ask you obturator, gemellus, or quadratus femoris. I really doubt that. But if you're familiar with them, at least you'll know where they are. They're the muscles in the back that attach to either the sacrum or the ischium, ischial tuberosity, ischium, ilium, iliac crest, ilium, iliac. They attach to the sacrum, and they attach then to the femur, kind of the lateral and medial aspect of the femur. And let's start with the muscles of the inner hip. So let me blow this up. So on top, you see the muscles of the inner hip, and then on the bottom, you see the muscles which are the external rotators. So hold on a second. Everybody's got to make a living. All right, so everybody's got to work. All right, so up top you have the muscles of the deep abdominal wall. You have the psoas and the iliacus. And when you talk about the psoas, realize that there's 2 branches to the psoas. Also, I don't think they're going to ask you. There's the major psoas, or psoas major, which is what we think of as the psoas proper. And there's a thin muscle at the top called the psoas minor. I really don't think they're going to ask you to differentiate between those, but they do exist. If you see them in writing like that, now you know what they are. Hopefully you remember what they are. So the psoas major is here, and the psoas minor, not pictured in this one, is right here. It'd be right here. Actually, I could picture it for you just like this. So here's the psoas minor, and here's the psoas major next to it in red. Here's the psoas major in green over here. Psoas minor is not pictured. The fibers, I would say the direction of the fibers of the psoas go up, down, or superior, inferior. They also travel laterally. where they originate is the most stable portion, the lumbar spine, T12 through L5, and where they insert, the more movable portion, is the femur, specifically the lesser trochanter of the femur, or you could think the medial aspect of the femur, which hopefully is easier for you to remember because it's the muscles of the inner hip. So it's the inner aspect, the medial aspect of the femur. The function or the action is to flex the thigh and to flex the trunk, and also lateral rotation of the thigh. Let me just fix the order of this. Yeah, lateral rotation of the thigh and then lateral flexion of the trunk, the psoas. And let's take a look at the IlioPsoas, and then we'll do a little at the iliac muscle, and then we'll do a little movement. So the iliacus muscle, let's see. It's mainly a psoas synergist, or a synergist for the psoas, which is great because you don't really have to remember any separate actions, right? It basically does the same thing. But you have to think about a little bit more about which end is moving and which end is stable or which end is fixed. So when the proximal attachment is fixed, the muscle contributes to the flexion of the thigh, or it raises the knee. So when this portion here along the iliac, the inside of the iliac or the ilium is not moving, so the person is not bending over, the hip is not depressing or elevating. When that is stable, the result is that the foot picks up from the floor, the knee flexes, and the femur and the knee, they rise. On the other hand, if the distal attachment, the part down here, if that's fixed, like it's not moving the femur, if this part is fixed, then it has the effect of pulling the pelvis downward or hinging at the hip. It's kind of a deadlift action. Hopefully you all know what a deadlift is compared to a knee raise. So we talk about the origin and the insertion of muscles. The iliacus is one of those muscles that can be seen to have two ends. Either one could be an origin, depending on which one is more stable and which one is fixed. And which one is fixed depends on your intention for the movement. Are you going to keep your feet on the floor, or are you going to lift your feet off the floor? Think about running or jumping. The iliacus is really important in those. Obviously, so is the psoas. When the two fibers of the psoas and the iliacus come down to insert at the medial aspect of the femur, they form a common tendon called the IlioPsoas. The IlioPsoas, which is written right here, IlioPsoas. So let's take a look at the movements of these. Video panel, and then meeting controls. So guys, my suggestion to you is for the psoas and the IlioPsoas, my suggestion to you is that you stand up, because that way you can lift your foot off the floor, or you could leave it on the floor when you want to and hinge at the hips, and it'll make a lot more sense to you. So, let's see. So I'm going to stop the screen share now, and then we'll go back to the screen share. All right. So for the psoas muscle, it originates around T12 L1 in the spine. So if my hand were to travel really deep through my abdomen all the way back to my spine, that's where the psoas is, right about here. Right, if my two fingers were to meet. Right, so it starts at the spine, and the fibers travel down, and they travel laterally a little bit, and the iliacus starts on the inside of the iliac crest. So my ilia or my iliac crests are here, right, and then the iliacus muscle is on the inside. It's on the inside. So the psoas fibers begin here, and they travel down. The iliacus fibers begin here, and they travel down, and the two meet, and they insert on the inside of the femur. So if I flex my hip a little bit, you start to see the outline of my femur. My femur bone goes up here, goes up to here. This is the ball of my femur. So this is the greater trochanter, and my lesser trochanter, which is a little more difficult to feel, would be a little bit lower and in. So it's right about here where the iliacus, the IlioPsoas inserts. Now, I'll show you how to feel your iliacus fibers, but it's not necessary for the MBLEx. It's just a nice thing to be able to feel. So we're going to draw a triangle, and the triangle is going to be from the iliac crest. Here's the iliac crest right here, right? So that's the top of the triangle. And then if you go down, you should feel just down like about 2 inches, straight down, right? So that's 2 points of the triangle. And so iliac crest down to about where the rectus femoris, tendon is. And you can feel that it's the rectus femoris if you simply start to lift your foot off the floor. You can feel the rectus femoris contracting under your second finger. Right, so that's the 2 points of the triangle. Then we're gonna palpate for the beat of the inguinal artery, pulse of the inguinal artery, and my inguinal artery, I can feel it right about here, and it's about, you can feel the pulse throughout. So the point is to find the area where the inguinal artery is, and then put your third finger right in the middle. So now we have our triangle. We have the top, bottom, and we have the inner points of the triangle. Like this. So right in the middle of that triangle, is your IlioPsoas tendon. So your rectus femoris tendon is here, and your IlioPsoas tendon is going to be next to it, slightly medial. Now you can differentiate between the two of them because the rectus femoris tendon will be felt clearly when you flex your hip, clearly when you pick your foot up off the floor, right? The IlioPsoas muscle, on the other hand, will be felt very clearly when you pick up your foot off the floor and when you externally rotate, right? And your finger will naturally roll off of the rectus femoris muscle and onto the IlioPsoas muscle. Yeah. So now let's look at the difference between, so now that you can feel the IlioPsoas tendon. Now let's look at the difference in movement between the psoas and the iliacus. So the psoas muscle, recall that it does flexion at the hip, right? Let me just get the exact wording because I don't want to confuse you. So the psoas muscle does flexion of the trunk and of the thigh and lateral rotation of the thigh. So your psoas muscle will work when you're doing flexion of the trunk. So there can be some flexion of the spine, right? So flexion of the trunk and also flexion of the thigh. So when they say thigh, what they really mean is the leg at the hip or the thigh at the hip, right? It can be hip flexion, all the same terms here. Hip flexion, leg flexion at the hip, right? All the same. So the psoas is doing this movement. It also does this movement. So that's the two aspects of flexion. So imagine those fibers, the top fibers and the bottom fibers. You can imagine how the top fibers would be contracting to do trunk flexion, to do trunk and lumbar flexion. Top fibers would be active to do trunk and lumbar flexion, right? And then the bottom fibers, the IlioPsoas fibers, would be most active to do hip flexion, right? So these fibers up here, the upper fibers are not manipulating or changing the angle of the vertebrae right now. They're only shortening, bringing the entire torso down towards the femur. So my hip joint is flexing, right? So hip flexion, spine flexion, trunk flexion. So the second thing that it does is external rotation. And if you kind of quickly draw that triangle, just go from your ASIS, go down a couple inches and then go in about 1 inch. So here's my ASIS, and I'm going down about 2 inches and in about 1 inch. Your IlioPsoas should be right there. It's very ticklish spot on some individuals. So it also does external rotation, and you should feel some fibers contracting when you externally rotate like this. Should feel those fibers contracting a little bit as you externally rotate, but you'll definitely feel it if you flex the hip and then externally rotate. So flexion and then external rotation, or with the legs straight, look like this. The iliacus muscle, like we described earlier, is a synergist for the psoas. So when the iliacus is in use, it's supporting the movement of the psoas. So just like at the psoas, when the proximal or the upper part is fixed and not the proximal or upper part can be fixed, the lower part can be fixed or not moving, and that'll manipulate the body a little bit differently, spine versus hip joint. So when the lower part is fixed, when these fibers down here are fixed and not moving, the upper fibers will be assisting in the flexion of the trunk, right? And also the flexion of the hip. Is that right? With the distal attachment fixed to the muscle, helps to bring the trunk forwards against resistance. Yeah, bringing the trunk forward against resistance. I see. So when the distal end is fixed, there's more of a hip hinging action happening rather than a spine flexion. And that makes sense because the iliacus does not have fibers that attach to the spine. It has fibers that attach to the inside of the iliac, the inside of the pelvis. So the pelvis itself, when the lower fibers are fixed, the pelvis itself is going to be moving. So that's like a deadlift action, right? And if the upper fibers of the iliacus are fixed, which would also be when the psoas, the proximal psoas fibers are fixed, the lower fibers, the IlioPsoas fibers, will then lift the hip. So when the proximal fibers are fixed, the distal fibers lift the leg, kind of like walking or kicking or stepping, lunging, all those movements, right? And when the distal fibers of the iliacus, which are really the IlioPsoas, when the distal fibers are fixed and the proximal fibers are contracting, they assist in hip hinging. So both are hip flexors, hip flexing movements, one with the foot coming off the floor and the femur moving, and the other with the foot on the floor and the pelvis moving. Both change the angle of the hip. The psoas is different from the iliacus in that it's the prime mover rather than the synergist, and it also acts on the spine to create some lumbar spine flexion or trunk flexion, as well as flexing the leg at the hip. Both of them do a little bit of external rotation. Psoas does the prime mover for external rotation of the thigh, with the iliacus muscle being the synergist for the psoas in the external rotation. Okay, next we're going to move on to the external rotators of the hip. We're only going to talk about one of them, and that's going to be that is going to be the piriformis muscle. So let me share my screen again. So you have the obturator externus, the obturator internus, the superior gemellus, inferior gemellus, who cares? And then you have the piriformis and the quadratus femoris. So the quadratus femoris is down here, right? The inferior gemellus is right here. And then the piriformis is above it. I don't know where the obturator externus internus are, probably right about here, I think. But or maybe this is the obturator. Okay, so anyway, the piriformis is definitely the most important of those, because I think it's the most well known, maybe because it's one of the prime movers of external rotation, or the more important prime mover of external rotation, but also because the piriformis is so close to the sciatic nerve. In some individuals, the sciatic nerve goes through the piriformis. In some individuals, it goes in front of the piriformis. But in either case, when the piriformis is tight due to misalignment of joints or due to repetitive strain, it can cause some compression or irritation of the sciatic nerve, which can result in numbness, tingling, or pain, sciatic type symptoms down the leg or in the side or in the front of the thigh. So the piriformis is like a major muscle that you have to look for and try to release as a myofascial type therapist. And it's a really, really, really important for you to know. So the origin and insertion of the piriformis, oh, I don't have that on here. I'll get that for you. So the piriformis originates on the sacrum, on the lateral border of the sacrum. Here's medial, here's lateral, originates on the lateral border of the sacrum. And then, wait a minute, we don't need all this stuff here. So let me just quickly erase some of this so you can see it more clearly. Okay, this here is the piriformis muscle with that soon to be green arrow pointing at it. Yeah, piriformis muscle right there. So the piriformis, the motion of the piriformis is very simple. Oh, I'm sorry. It originates at the sacrum. It actually, technically, it goes between the SI joint underneath the sacrum, and it becomes part of the pelvic floor. So the piriformis is unique of all the lateral rotators, of all the external rotators, and that it forms part of the pelvic floor. And then it inserts, I believe, on the greater trochanter of the femur. At any rate, it functions to externally or laterally rotate the hip. That is a movement that you definitely should be able to reproduce and be aware of. And that movement looks like this. So just like with the external rotation of the shoulder, you do want to be able to practice it with multiple angles of the limb, right? So with your legs straight, your knees straight, external rotation looks like that, with the knee and the foot pointed out. So here's my midline pointed this way. Okay, now I'm going to point it outward that way. Right. And then if you flex the hip, external rotation can look like this. If you flex the knee and the hip, external rotation looks like that. I hope you guys are doing this. If you keep the hip neutral but the knee flexed, external rotation looks like this. You see external rotation, for example, in ballet, when we turn the feet out and knees out, that's externally rotating. You see it in boxing and martial arts when one knee or one foot is turned out, the other's in the front. Anytime the knee is turned out, you see it in skateboarding, see it in skating. Sometimes you see people who walk like this. They're walking with one leg in external rotation. Perhaps you know someone who walks like that. So external rotation accomplished mostly by the piriformis. Also contributed to strongly by the psoas muscle and the other synergists of external rotation, the gemellus and the obturator and the quadratus femoris. Okay, guys, that's our time. Hopefully I cleared things up for you. You know, this presentation, it's short. There's only like 11 or 12 slides, but there's quite a lot for you to practice here. This is one of those movement heavy sections. So when you go into when you open up this file, go into My Drive, and then you find the file named Kinesio Muscle Locations, Attachments, and Actions. I should rename it Abdomen and External Rotators. Probably I'll name it that. You open it up, make sure that you practice the movements of each muscle. Refer to the video if you need to, yeah. Okay, guys, good luck. We'll see you on Monday. Remember, next week, Monday and Wednesday are the last class for this series, and this is the last MBLEx class that I'm teaching so far on the books. I'm sure that Varsity will assign me another MBLEx class, and you guys are welcome to attend those in the future. So just please let me know if you have any questions over text message, or if you want help with anything, just let me know. Okay. Do you guys have?
So we're gonna
Thank
be
you so much.
able to kind of go through this class again with you if you allow us then for the next class that you get.
Yeah. If you haven't taken the MBLEx or you want to retake, you just hit me up and ask me if I'm teaching any classes, and I'm happy to have you guest in
Okay.
the class.
But these videos will be up for quite a while then on YouTube, right? So we can kind of look back over it, take
Yeah.
notes, etc.
Yeah. I'm going to leave them up. I'm not going to take them down. And
Okay.
if I do take them down, it'll just be because they are at first like unedited, and then when I edit them to get rid of the unnecessary parts and then put handy labels and chapter markers on them, I'll put them back up. So always make a note of the date of the video you're looking at. So if today's date is 4/26, it'll go up as 4/26 unedited, and it'll reappear in a few weeks as 4/26 muscles of the abdomen and external rotators of the hip. And we'll have chapters on there.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. You're welcome.
Thanks.
Have a great week, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, same.